My manager said, "You'll never be successful without us." Then he saw my face on Forbes magazine. The last thing he ever said to me at work was a joke. At least, he thought it was funny. "You'll never be successful without us," he said, laughing in front of the entire team. I remember the silence that followed. And I also remember how confidently he said it, like it was a fact, not an opinion. He had no idea that less than a year later, his entire tone would change the moment he saw my face on the cover of Forbes. My name is Sophia Reynolds. I am 32 years old, and I live in San Francisco, USA. And this is the story of how I went from being dismissed in a corporate office to becoming the success they said I could never achieve without them. I worked at a mid-sized marketing agency called Brightline Media. Fast-paced environment, long hours, and a culture where confidence mattered more than competence. My manager, Kevin Blake, was the type of person who confused authority with intelligence. He liked speaking loudly in meetings. He liked interrupting people mid-sentence. And he especially liked reminding people who kept them employed. That last part mattered, because he used it often. At first, I didn't challenge him. I was relatively new, trying to build experience, trying to stay invisible enough not to become a target. But Kevin didn't need a reason to target someone. He just needed an opportunity. It started small. Credit for my ideas going elsewhere. My reports being presented without my name. My contributions described as team effort. Then it escalated. Direct criticism in meetings. Sarcastic comments about my overthinking. And subtle reminders that I should be grateful to be here. I still remember the meeting that changed everything. Quarterly strategy review. Senior staff present. Important client campaign discussion. I presented a marketing optimization plan I had spent weeks building. Data-driven. Clear ROI projections. Client-aligned strategy. At first, it went well. Until Kevin interrupted. He leaned back in his chair and said, "This is why junior employees shouldn't try to play strategist." A few people laughed. Not loudly, but enough. I stayed still, because reacting would have given him what he wanted. He continued, "You'll learn eventually. Success here isn't about big ideas. It's about understanding your place." That last line stayed in the room longer than it should have. After the meeting, as people were leaving, he walked past me, smiling, and said quietly, "You'll never be successful without us." It wasn't even said like a threat, more like advice. That was the worst part. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I had already started thinking differently. That night, I stayed late in the office, looking at my project files, my strategies, my analysis work, and I realized something important. They weren't just underestimating me. They were depending on me without acknowledging it. So I started doing something quietly, something they never noticed. I stopped building for them and started building for myself. At first, it was small freelance consulting work, then independent strategy contracts, then one major client referral that changed everything. I didn't quit my job immediately. I couldn't afford to. But I also stopped relying on validation from the place that didn't respect me. Months passed. Double workload. Day job during office hours. Private work at night. No recognition. No applause. Just progress. Then came the breakthrough. A startup client I had been consulting for raised funding. A major funding round. And my strategy was publicly credited in their investor release. I didn't think much of it at the time. I just kept working. Until one morning, everything changed. I walked into work like usual. Coffee in hand. Laptop bag over shoulder. Nothing different. until someone in the office lobby said, Sophia. I turned and saw my coworker holding a printed magazine, hands slightly shaking. Forbes. I didn't understand immediately, until she turned it toward me, and I saw my face. Cover page. Headline feature. Rising independent strategist, disrupting modern marketing models. The room didn't feel real for a second. Because moments like that don't feel like your life. They feel like someone else's story. People started gathering. Whispers. Confusion. Recognition slowly replacing dismissal. Then I heard his voice. Kevin. What is this? He walked closer. Took the magazine. Looked at it. Then at me. For the first time since I met him. He didn't look confident. He flipped through the pages quickly. Reading. Processing. Losing control of the narrative he always believed in. Then he said something quieter. Almost uncertain. You did this. I didn't smile. Didn't celebrate. Just answered honestly. Yes. Silence. The same man who once told me I would never succeed without him was now staring at proof that I had succeeded far beyond him. And he had nothing to say. Because success doesn't argue. It simply appears. The moment Kevin stopped speaking, the office didn't explode into noise like in movies. It went quieter. That kind of silence, where people are trying to decide whether what they're seeing is real or dangerous to react to. He held the Forbes magazine in his hand, longer than he needed to. Like it might change if he stared at it hard enough. It didn't. My face was still there. My name was still there. And the story was still true. Finally, he looked up at me. But not like a manager anymore. Not even like a coworker. More like someone trying to recover from a mistake they can't undo. This is staged, he said weakly. Nobody responded. Because even he didn't believe it when he said it. One of my coworkers finally spoke up quietly. It's real. It's on the Forbes website too. That sentence hit harder than anything else. Because it removed any room for denial. Kevin's expression tightened. For the first time, he didn't have control over the room. He looked around, expecting someone to support him. No one did. That's when HR was called. Not by me. By someone else in the office. Because suddenly, this wasn't a casual moment anymore. It was a shift in hierarchy. I stayed standing where I was. Not moving. Not reacting. Because I knew something most people in the room were just starting to realize. Nothing about my position there was going to be the same again. Kevin tried to speak again. But his voice changed now. Less confident. More careful. Look, Sophia, we can talk about this internally. I interrupted him calmly. We already did talk internally, I said. You just didn't listen. That was the difference. Not anger. Clarity. HR arrived a few minutes later. 2 representatives. Serious tone. Immediate attention on the magazine first. Then on me. Then on Kevin. They asked to step into a private room. The entire office was watching now. Not loudly, but enough to know something irreversible was happening. Kevin stood up quickly. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he said. I've always supported her work. Nobody reacted. Because everyone remembered the meetings. The comments. The interruptions. The dismissals. And suddenly, his version of events didn't match anyone else's memory. Inside the meeting room, HR reviewed the Forbes article carefully. Then my employment record. Then my recent external consulting disclosures. One of them finally asked me, were you working external projects while employed here? I answered honestly. Yes. Kevin jumped in immediately. That's a violation of company policy. I turned to him slowly and said, only if the company is still relevant to the work I'm doing. Silence again, because that sentence made something very clear. I wasn't dependent on them anymore. Not financially, not professionally, not strategically. HR continued reviewing documents. Then one of them said something that shifted everything again. There is no exclusivity violation listed in her contract for independent consulting. Kevin blinked, confused now. No, that can't be right. But it was right, because I had reviewed my contract carefully months ago, before I ever made a move. That wasn't luck. That was preparation. The HR representative turned to Kevin. Do you have any formal documentation disputing her external professional recognition? He didn't, because there was nothing to dispute. Only reality. After a long pause, HR made a decision. Kevin would be placed under internal review for workplace conduct, management behavior, and professional misconduct evaluation. The moment those words were spoken, the power in the building shifted completely. Not dramatically, quietly, but permanently. When we left the room, Kevin didn't look at me right away. He stared at the floor, like he was trying to find the version of himself that used to feel in control. When he finally looked up, he said something softer. Not arrogant, not mocking, just broken confidence. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I responded simply. I didn't leave. I just stopped staying small. That was it. No argument followed, because there was nothing left to argue about. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. My name started appearing in industry conversations. My consulting work expanded rapidly. New clients reached out. Investors began referencing my Forbes feature. And at the office, things became quieter around Kevin. He wasn't fired immediately, but he wasn't the same presence anymore. Authority doesn't survive exposure. It just slowly disappears. One evening, as I was packing up to leave, I saw him at his desk. Still working, but differently now. No longer loud. No longer certain. He looked up as I walked past, and for a second, I thought he might say something else. But he didn't, because he finally understood something simple. The truth wasn't that I became successful after leaving them. The truth was that I had already been building success while they were busy underestimating me. Outside the building, I paused for a moment, looked back at the office lights, the place that once defined my limits, and realized something important. The people who tell you you'll never succeed without us are rarely predicting your future. They're describing the limits of their own imagination. And when you outgrow those limits, they don't know how to respond. Except silence.